Okay, I'm not sure how much you're going to be able to see on this video, but no matter how careful I am about making sure that my border fits, there's still just a little bit of ripple in here. So I'll try to get that out with my binding strips. To start with, on the blog post, you can see that I line up the top of my edge with a horizontal line, and I line up a side edge with a vertical line on my cutting table. And I make sure that everything is straight, and I check right down here in this corner. And if that corner is not nice and square, then I use one of my big square rulers and I square the corner. Now I've already done it on this quilt. Once I'm sure that my corner is square, I have my binding already made, and I'm going to leave a tail. And I don't measure my borders, my top of my quilt, the center and the sides in average to get my borders to fit. I work in electric quilt, I square up my blocks, and I know what size they are. I know what size my sashing is, so I know what size my quilt top is going to be, and I just go by the measurements that the electric quilt gives me. So now I'm going to start adding my binding at the bottom of the quilt, and I know what the width is. So I'm going to start at my halfway point, and I've made a mark there. And I'm leaving a tail, and don't be chintzy because that tail is what you're going to be working with in a few minutes. And having sufficient length there can make your job a whole lot easier. Okay, I matched up the mark there, and then I'm going to match up the other mark down here. And I'll make sure that I have that exactly where it needs to be, and I've made it edge to edge, not with my seam allowances. And then you see I have a little bit of extra right in there that I need to, a little extra ripple that I need to make sure I get mashed down. So I'm just going to pin my binding. And the binding is the exact measurement that it should be. And once I get it pinned, I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew. Now, my seam allowance, I cut my binding strips 2.5 inches wide and then fold it in half. I do not make bias binding unless I'm making a curved edge. And obviously on this quilt I'm not. So when I get down here, I'm going to stop sewing the same distance from the edge of this quilt as my seam allowance. And so since my seam allowance is a little bit more than 1/4 inch, I'm going to stop sewing about 3/8 inches. I don't normally mark it, but for purposes of this video, I will mark it. And I'm going to take this to the machine with my walking foot, and I'm going to add this binding.